Hello, everyone. My name is Adele Fitzgerald, and I am the Electronic Resources Librarian at St. Joseph's College in New York. And on behalf of the NASIG Continuing Education Committee, I'd like to welcome you to our May webinar, Introduction to Sushi, presented by Ann Osterman and Oliver Pesch. Before the presentation, I have a few quick announcements. First, this webinar is being recorded, and anyone who registered for the webinar will receive a link to the recording via email shortly following the webinar. Second, if you have any questions for the speakers during the presentation, please enter them into the WebEx Q&A box located at the lower right corner of the WebEx window. If you cannot see the Q&A box, click on the Q&A icon in the upper right corner of the WebEx window. Then the Q&A box will then appear in the lower right corner. The speakers will answer your questions at the end of the final presentation. And finally, when the webinar is over, you will be redirected to a survey about the webinar. I hope that you will take a few minutes to fill it out and let us know how we're doing, what we can do better, and share ideas for future webinars. And with that, I will introduce our speakers for today. Ann Osterman is Director of the Virtual Library of Virginia, the consortium of the 72 nonprofit college and university libraries within the Commonwealth of Virginia. She currently serves on the NISO SUSHI Standing Committee and the Counter Release 5 Communications Subgroup, and she is chair of the Supervisory Board of Usus. Oliver Pesch works as Chief Strategist for EBSCO Information Services, where he helps set direction for EBSCO's resource management and access products. He is currently co-chair of the NISO SUSHI Standing Committee, chair of the Counter Board of Directors, serves on both the Counter Executive Committee and Technical Advisory Groups, and chairs the Counter Release 5 Technical Working Group. And with that, I'm going to pass the controls over to Oliver first.
Well, good afternoon or good morning, wherever you're from, everyone. So Ann and I are pleased to be here to talk to you about sushi. And just to give you a quick outline of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to give you an overview of the sushi protocol to provide enough understanding so you know how it works and what you need to do to retrieve data. It is a protocol that needs some configuration, so we will talk about the basics of configuring a client, setting yourself up to be successful in harvesting using sushi. Ann's going to walk you through a few scenarios where we actually retrieve counter reports with sushi, and then she's going to talk about working with the XML version of counter reports. So sushi actually doesn't deliver a spreadsheet, it delivers things in XML. And that has its own interesting challenges and opportunities, which Ann will address. And then, we'll wrap up with a bit of a summary of where sushi is going. And then hopefully have time for questions. So without further ado, here we go. So SUSHI stands for the Standardized Usage Statistics Harvesting Initiative. It became a standard in 2007, and officially it's an ANSI standard. Under NISO, it is Z3993. 2014 was the date it was last affirmed, and there's a few minor adjustments to it then. Its role is enabling the automation of the request and retrieval of XML versions of counter usage reports. There's a link here which you can get to, I think, from the webinar, and slides will be available on request too if you want them from either Ann or I. Just send us a note. So I'm not going to read all of these, but you can grab them later. So here's a timeline, and we're not going to go through the whole thing, but the basics of this are that in 2002, Counter was launched, and the goal with Counter was to provide some level of standardization of presenting usage information for the growing number of online resources. And around 2004, 2005 timeframe, ERMs came into the picture, and it was around then that an obvious use for those was harvesting counter statistics and mapping those to holdings and giving you the cost per use and those great things. And what was quickly discovered was the act of having to go out to dozens of content provider websites, download reports, and upload those into the ERM. It was just not a scalable solution. So that prompted the SUSHI initiative, which was to develop a way to automate that. First use of this was in 2006, became an official standard in 2007. In 2008, Counter kind of required it. 2012, where Release 4 came out, that became much, much more important. And now it's expected to be a feature. So that's just a quick review of the history. So how does it work? Well, it's a quick diagram. So imagine you've got a library system. Maybe you're using an ERM or system on the left, and you need to get usage data from a content provider, which is represented on the right. So if you want to automate that, you want your ERM system to, say at a certain time each month, make a request of what's called a SUSHI client and say, go get the usage, I want this usage report, Journal Report 1, from this content provider, go get it for me. And the SUSHI client sends the request to the server on the content provider site. They then fetch the usage data out of whatever reporting system they've got, package it up, return it in the response. The client then grabs the usage out of that response and then passes it back to the ERM or puts it into the usage data store there for processing. So SUSHI as a protocol really are those two orange lines in the middle of the screen. So let's talk about using SUSHI to actually retrieve data. So firstly, you need a client. It's a client server, you need a client. The SUSHI standard is really, as a standard, it describes how two applications can exchange data. But the standard itself doesn't actually do anything. It's a description to enable other software to do it. So I'm having challenges. There we go. So to use SUSHI, it requires a client, and that client has to talk to a server. Well, the content providers provide the server. So today, if a publisher or other content provider is compliant with Counter, they also offer a SUSHI server for automating the retrieval of those Counter reports. But you're the one that the library needs to provide the client. And there's the challenge. So where do you find a client? So there's a number of commercial applications, whether it's an ERM system or a usage consolidation product or so forth. And typically, they will have a SUSHI client built in. So if you're using like EBSCO Usage Consolidation, ERM from Innovative, products from Ex Libris and ProQuest related to usage, they will have a SUSHI client built in. So basically, if you use any of those, you have your client. There's some open source options, and they come with some caveats. Typically, open source is provided as is, and they'll have some limitations. So you need to have the expertise to actually work with those. A lot of them will only assist with actually retrieving the Counter report. You still need to work with it. Some of them just serve as a proof of concept, so they may not be fully ready for prime time. But generally, they're often just a starting point for creating a system. So if you're about to build something more comprehensive, these are a good place to start because they probably lack additional like analysis capabilities and that sort of thing. So examples are, there's a MISO client, and that was produced originally by Serial Solutions. So it's very simple, works, it's pretty effective. One of the exceptions to the above caveats is Coral's usage statistics module, and that actually has a lot of functionality built in. And there's a couple of others, PyCounter and SoapUI, or other tools that can be used to retrieve reports. NISO, the SUSHI has a presence on the NISO website, and from within that, there's actually a site for tools and aids, and it shows you and gives you links to some examples of open source tools. So, good place to look. Okay, so you have your client, and when the client requests a report, it needs to know a few things. It needs to know where the server is, and it needs to be able to tell that server who is making the request and which institutions the usage is for, plus what report and for what dates. So the three kind of key pieces of information that we're seeing here are the SUSHI server URL. There's a notion of a requester ID, which identifies the client typically, and the customer ID. So you can imagine if you are going after usage from EBSCO host, EBSCO has a SUSHI server, but you got to tell it what customer that's for. So that's the key information that you're going to need. And so what we're going to look at here is some examples of actually configuring that information. So assuming you have those three key pieces of information that are needed, how do you actually go about putting it in the system? And for the first example, we're going to just take a quick look through this usage consolidation product. We're in the product, we're on the main screen, we're going to access the platforms. In this case, we can browse a list, search the list. We're going to pick ACM Digital Library. As we look at the details, you can see the details on the screen, and we're going to scroll down a little bit here and scroll down a little bit more, and now you see the SUSHI settings. And here you see the three pieces of information that we needed. We need the URL, we need the requester ID, and we need the customer ID. Furthermore, because a content provider may support many reports, there's also the option for you to go in and say, well, when you go pull these from SUSHI, maybe I only want Journal Report 1, I don't want Book Report 1 as well. So you can pick which reports you want. Okay, so that's, if you're in an ERM or whatever, the very similar kinds of processes you're going to use to go in, activate a platform, add the information to that platform, and set it up. But we're going to talk about MISO. Remember, I just told you it was a fairly simple product. It's been around for quite a while. It's simple, it's effective, and Anne's actually going to walk you through a demonstration of it. But the first thing you need to do is get a client. Now, MISO is an application that actually runs on your computer. And it's available in open source, and I think by just looking at this, we may need to double check that URL for where the code is. We will update it if necessary on the slides and send them out. But basically, it's something you download. In this case, I've downloaded it on my computer. It's in the MISO folder. on my C drive, my hard drive. I'm bringing up the Windows Explorer here, and you'll see there's a sushiconfig.csv. So this is where the configuration happens with MISO. The sushiconfig.csv is a comma separated value. It's a text file, basically, and you can configure multiple platforms. Let's take a quick look at what that looks like. I'm loading it up in Excel. It's going to look something like this, but let's zoom in. So you can put in the library code. So I think in the case of Viva uses this, and that would be an identifier for each of the libraries that make up Viva. Provider name, EBSCO, AMS journals, so forth. And those two elements, this one and the library code, actually are used in creating the names of the files that actually are on the hard drive after the thing is launched. So it's kind of important in tracking who gets what usage. The counter release, release 4 in this case. You then put the URL. So this is the Sushi server URL. You add that in column D. Requester ID goes in E. Customer ID, the requester name goes in F. And email. Customer ID goes in H. That's the other key piece of information. Customer name. And then you add yes or no as to which reports you want loaded. So in this case, we've got 4 things set up, and were we to execute MISO, it would walk through and process each of those 4 rows, grab the reports, and grab the reports specified in J, K, and L that we had said yes to. All right. Now, we're not going to go into detail on this one, but if you haven't investigated Coral, you may want to. It's an open source ERM. You can do some live demos on a hosted version, but if you're really going to use it, you have to download it on your own servers, which is one of the challenges of it. But it does have a fairly good usage counter statistics module. It does support Sushi, and you can load things on an automated basis. So something to look at. Okay, so another tool that we've talked about earlier was SoapUI. It's free, it's open source. It's really designed to test web services. It's more of a testing tool, but it's kind of interesting because it does allow you to configure a bunch of Sushi servers and download reports and save them and do some kind of interesting things. The thing about it is it's not the friendliest thing to look at. You're actually really looking at the bare metal. You're actually seeing the XML that's exchanged. But sometimes that's interesting because it's really interesting to see what is actually coming back from the content provider. And so it's not being masked by a user interface and so forth. But so if you're at all proficient with these kinds of tools, this is an excellent tool to have in your arsenal for working with Sushi. Okay, so the details for client configuration. Let's talk about that. So we talked about you need a URL, you need a requester ID, you need a customer ID. Well, that information is going to come from the content provider. Also, many content providers require Sushi to be activated before it can be used. And that's a security feature for a lot. Not so much important on academic libraries, but if it's a pharmaceutical or a corporate library, what your patrons use is pretty sensitive information, so you don't want just anybody being able to go request it. So basically, you have to go in and the library says, okay, this client can actually harvest using sushi, and here's the credentials they need to present. So one of the key things, you're either going to find this information out on the administrative website of your content provider or working through their customer support folks. I guess the thing that I always say that if you feel you have to guess as to what to put in a credential for harvesting sushi, there's a pretty much 100% chance that you're going to guess wrong. So if you don't know exactly what to put, ask, because it's just going to be very frustrating because it's not the kind of stuff you can guess at. So the process of activating a platform for sushi, that's going to vary by content provider. And I know you've got a lot of content providers, but there are some tools that help out. Recently, Counter introduced their registries of compliance on the new Counter website. There's a link to it here. But jumping into it, I'm going to show you an example. This is the American Physical Society, APS, and you can see some basic data here. But if we dig a little deeper, scroll down, it lists the reports they supply. And if you scroll down even further, it lists the sushi data. So just to highlight, there's instructions to follow, how to get the credentials. The URL is presented. And then there's information about what you will need for the requester ID and the customer ID. So this is a great place to start. You can search it by content provider, platform, or publisher, and it gets you at some pretty good data. Great place to start. Now, it turns out that a lot of publishers use third parties to manage their usage, whether it's Adapon or Highwire or Scholarly IQ, Silverchair, MPS. And so the advantage of that to us is the fact that a lot of publishers are using the same system. Means it's once you sort of know how to find information out for an Adapon-based system, it'll be pretty easy for the next one. So it just simplifies things a lot. So let's walk through some examples. In this case, we're going to find login, or walk through the screenshots of a login of MIT Press, which is an Adapon. And here we've logged in. You can see the login information, and we're logging in. It's an institutional login. Once we get in there, there's a tab on the screen called Institutional Administration. When we click that, it shows retrieval via sushi, and there it shows you right there what the URL is, what the requester ID is, and the customer reference. So pretty straightforward. And we see it. Okay. We're going to look at the ASTM digital library, and this is an example of the MPS Insight sort of user experience. So here we've logged in again to the administrative portal for MPS Insight. In this case, it was an IEEE, I guess. We're on to the Manage Accounts section, you see there. You click on that. This Manage Sushi, you click on that. And here they present a list of available sushi partners. It was Ex Libris, for example. You would click on this little right thing, and by doing that, you would grant permissions, and then after you did that, the little red flag turns to green flags, and then it's also going to present you with the credentials that you would need, but basically that's how you would activate it. Scholarly IQ is another one. Here we'll look at Ingenta Connect. Again, we've logged into the reporting portal, and you'll see the little sushi up in the upper right. If we click on that, there's a form to fill out to request enable sushi access for the above. You click on that, and then you'll get an email actually, but it also presents you the credentials that you need on the screen. And that's a combination both activating and providing you the data that you need. And so here's a larger view. The URL, the requester, the customer, those three key pieces of information we need. Okay, so that takes us to the end of how to configure things. And I'm going to turn it over to Anne now, who's going to walk us through some of the harvesting excitement.
Thanks, Oliver, and I'm getting myself set here. Okay, so we have seen kind of how to configure a sushi client, and we know a little more about how to get the information. So we're going to go through basically the workflow for what it would look like to go ahead and harvest. We'll start with a commercial product, and we're going to see EBSCO usage consolidation again. So this looks familiar to you. This is what Oliver showed you a little while ago. If you go to Upload here in the menu, you'll get kind of a landing page, and under the usage consolidation section, you can see the word there, Load Counter Files. We'll select that. And here we have a Load Counter Files page, and it has kind of these menu options that we'll walk through. First, you have to pick a platform. So in this case, we'll say ACM Digital Library. That's the platform we want to harvest from. And here on the right, you'll see there are some instructions and other information. So you can see you have your usage, that's URL, your credentials, your password. And it looks like you're all set to go. We'll just go ahead, and well, you can see it here as well that we have selected Journal Report 1 as the particular report that we want to do. We'll say click Harvest via Sushi. Now we select the date range and click Harvest. We can go ahead and click the back button or Upload. And here, so now we said to it, Harvest ACM, given the date range, you want a JR1 file. And once you come back to this kind of landing page, you can say, I want to view all of the loads, and now you can see those provided here. So these are, you can see the date, the platform, which report, so we're harvesting JR1s and BR1s from ACM, what months of coverage, are there any exceptions, and is the file load complete? So here at the top is the one that we just requested, that one from ACM, a JR1 for March of 2015. This is an application that provides reporting but more, so it also has analysis. So what happens is it will automatically bring that counter report data in and processes it and make it available for your reporting within the system. So that was the commercial way. That, of course, if you happen to have that at hand, that can be nice. You don't always have a commercial system on hand, and so what you can use instead are some of the open source and free clients that Oliver pointed out. We're going to walk through MISO, which is one of the ones that's commonly used. So to do this, we're going to harvest a set of platforms, and then we will also look at the XML files. As Oliver said at the beginning, Sushi does not provide you a spreadsheet, right? It provides you XML, which it does take a little more refining to get something that you can use, but there is a power in having that kind of delimited data and described data. So here you can see this is kind of a desktop view, and it's a command line program. So it doesn't run with its own graphic user interface. We have to use the command prompt. So your computers generally have these. Might just take some doing to find where the command prompt is. We'll go to the Start icon on Windows, and then here you can see there's that command prompt under Accessories. So we're going to say that we want to perform those text-based command line functions, and here we are. So this is what you'll see when you open it. You can see that this is Oliver's computer. So within this, we're going to use the change directory and navigate to the MISO. And when you install MISO on your computer, that's generally where you will put it, is simply at the base level on your hard drive or the C drive in its own folder. So we're going to say change directory, go to MISO. And here we have, you can see now we're at that baseline of C:/MISO. So we're at that folder level. And what we're doing is typing in a command. So the -D is going to say these dates, right? And the dates format does matter, right? There's that year, month. So we're going to use that 2015-03, 2015-03. So that's the start and end. So we're getting just that 1 month of data. The -X is telling MISO to save the XML version of the file. It just takes a little time in how we have the XML folders. So before, when Oliver showed you that sushi config file, remember it had which platforms, which months, or I mean, sorry, which platforms, which kind of reports. What you're doing here is saying, in that sushi config file, I want to pull all of those reports for all of those platforms for this particular month of data. And here's a little zoom in on that. And what you can see, when Oliver was talking about this before, some of those components in the sushi config file are not passed to the vendor server necessarily, but they do become part of the file name, so they're important in a different way. So here we see the provider name, that was the ACM Digital Library, your library code, so this is Sample University, which dates you requested it for, and the report name. So if you have all of these, I'll just jump back for a second. So now let's say you have all of these. You have ones from EBSCO hosts, Wiley, etc., AMS. We have all of these files, these XML files that we have now downloaded to our computer. Let's just take a look at, if you open up any of those, what would it look like? So on its own, you can see the XML, which has a lot of cascading descriptions about what the content is. It's not really human readable, right? You can recognize what's going on. You can see the platform, you can see the journal, you can see the dates, but this is not something that you can use directly for analysis. So, Core Counter XML is a great way to exchange users' data with servers. It's not user-friendly. When you have a commercial product, it will handle that transformation of the XML. You are, in this essence, shielded from the XML. It, of course, is pulling that, but it translates that for you into something that you can use. If you are using MISO or SoapUI or any of those other open source ones, you probably need some help. You need some tools to help you read and understand that XML. And the easiest thing to do is really to use Microsoft Excel. So what we'll do here is you can say that you're going to open the file as XML in Microsoft Excel. It will map all the elements to individual columns. It's not always as cleanly as you want it to be, but it will map each element to its own column. And you can basically clean up those columns by deleting or hiding the ones that you don't need. You can also use filters to limit the list to just the ones that you care about. And then you will have a nice usable spreadsheet to use. And it's not as if you have to do this every time. What you can do with this is once you've loaded in an XML file to Excel and you like the way it looks, you can simply save that as a loading file in Excel so that you can, the next time it's preset with all the things that you want and all the ways that you want, it's filtered in the right way. It only pulls in the elements that you want. And from that point on, you can pull in all of your other XML through that loading file in Excel, and you're not recreating the wheel every time. But to give an example of what it looks like that very first time that you're opening a fresh XML file, You simply go to XML files, pick the one you want to open. So we'll open that ACM Digital Library sample, and you get something that looks like this. It looks, at first, a little messy. Each one gets its own column. You see a lot of repeating information because all of these, this is the requester ID or the customer ID, they do cascade across all of those. We're just going to scroll over to the right a little bit, and you can see some of the other ones. You can see Scholarly IQ, so that third-party provider is coming up there. You get the University Library. Now you're getting things that are a little more familiar. Here's your print ISSN, online ISSN, and over a little further, now you'll see the months of data and what kind of request was it. Was it a full-text HTML, full-text PDF, totals, in this case mobile uses, and you'll start to see all of those counts for all of the different metric types that you'd use to see in a normal spreadsheet. So one of the first things you can do to cut out a lot of the lines that you don't need is you can say, I'm just going to filter to the lines that have a full text total metric type. Okay, so it went from a tremendous mess to now something that is much more digestible, right? You have that filtered list, and now you can see here are my journals across the side, all of my titles that I have in this package. Those are the dates for the usage because, of course, you can pull multiple dates at a time. Here is your full text total metric, and now for each of these, you see the count down here. So there's 28 full text uses in March for ACM proceedings. There are 8 full text uses for eLearn journal in March as well. So you can make this even a little cleaner, right? All of these columns at the beginning, you might not want to see them at all, so you can delete them if you want. You can also hide them. And now it's looking a little better. We can see that X and Y are empty, and that is where the ISSN would normally go. So it is, on the one hand, this approach is easy, right? It's an easy way to pull in Excel and see it in, pull in XML and see it in Excel. With this very simplistic thing, because of the way the data is organized, you will lose the ISSNs. But at least it is an easy way to get a title level usage. So we've zoomed out now, and we can see we have platform publisher, the journal title, what kind of data type is it, begin and end months, request, full text total, and count. So Oliver did create an XML conversion tool, and it's on Usus. I don't think I put the Usus site on here, but usus.org.uk is this counter-supported community group to support people using Counter and Sushi. And this tool is it basically is a macro-enabled Excel file that takes a MISO loaded JR1 file and makes it into Excel, right? So it is, like I said, it's available there. The big advantage of this is that you do not lose the ISSNs. But we basically, when you open this tool and you click to choose a file, you select the file to convert, and here we are. We have a nice, you would say, normal-looking Excel file that has the look that you would expect if you had downloaded the spreadsheet from the vendor's website instead of pulling the XML. If you scroll over here, you can see that it does retain the ISSNs, and that's because of the way that Oliver configured the macro. And here it has all of your usage. So the other thing that is missing, if you are very familiar with counter reports, you might notice that it's missing the total for all journals. That's because that is not contained in the XML, but it's easy to add if you need it, of course, but it's something additional that is missing just from the basic conversion.
Excuse me, Anne?
Yeah.
It's Adele. I'm sorry to interrupt. There is a question from Kelly. She wants to know, can you repeat that part about losing ISSNs? Is
Sure.
that specific to your example in Excel or overall with Sushi unless you use the converter?
Oh, well, it's when you lose the ISSN, it is in the conversion, the very simple conversion using Excel. So I don't have slides here, but I have slides from another presentation that kind of shows on the side, if you ever open an XML file in Excel and you click the tab that shows you the schema for the Excel, you'll see that the way that the values are nested, and it's worth it, I think, to jump back to here, because you can see that it's on a different line, right? Here we see the ISSNs, print and online, and their values, and you can see if I were scrolling over to the side, here they're simply on different lines. So that's why the data is there, but it's disconnected because of the way that Excel pulls in XML in the most simple way.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So let's see, I think we are up to, no, I think I went too far. So also on Usus, thank you to Oliver at EBSCO, we have some compliance testing and data analysis templates. So it is, of course, in the perfect world, everything is correct and comes in and has no problems, but we know that's not the reality with usage data. And sometimes it can be hard to diagnose what's going on and what's going wrong, or if you want to see what is a usage spike in an automated way, right? There's a lot of complexity around understanding the usage data, and there are some tools that help you towards that. And this one is another located on usus.org.uk within the tools. It is a JR1 testing and analysis template. So you can see here, there are instructions on the first one. Basically, you want to make sure that you've cleared out all the content on that particular worksheet, and you actually paste in a JR1 data. You're saying Control-A, delete all the sample data, and now you have pasted in your JR1, right? So this is either one you've converted from MISO, or it's one that you've pulled in through other ways. And what this tells you on the analysis tab is what might be some errors. So here we have an invalid ISSN, right? They have marked NA, and that will show as invalid. There's also ways to show moderately excessive usage and excessive usage, and those are controlled by, I believe it is, if the usage in any given month is more than half of the total year's usage, I believe that's excessive. And I think it is if any given month is more than a third of what's present, then it's moderately excessive usage. So that's a way to kind of quickly and visually highlight any errors. On the final tab, there's a compliance tab as well. You'll kind of see what are the overall pass, fail, and warnings for different problems with your JR1. There's also a brand new counter report validation tool. Here's the URL for that. And that's similar, right? This is, of course, free to use. It's similar to that compliance and analysis template in that you get errors and warnings. So this is that same file put through that we saw before, and it identifies errors with math and invalid ISSN. So it's a nice, really handy online way to get a feel for it can also be why your ERMS is not pulling in a file correctly. These tools can help you diagnose what's wrong and then communicate with the vendor about making corrections. A few other considerations. It's important to know when to harvest. Counter allows usage providers up to 4 weeks to process and prepare their data. So if you're finishing the month of April, it might take an additional 4 weeks, so very late May. And it varies by provider, so you'll get to know how your providers provide their data. And if you harvest too early, you will get an exception. And these next slides show you what that looks like. So this is an example of an exception return. This is the XML that you see when the usage isn't ready yet, and there's a zoom in here. you can see no usage available for requested dates. So you simply try that again, try to load it again when you are 4 weeks past the end of the reporting period. There is a lot of really good information on the NISO SUSHI website, including a whole section for sushi for librarians, so I encourage you to check that out. And here's that page. And now I think I'm going to hand it on back to Oliver.
Great, thanks, Ann. And I think we updated that testing tool, so it's a little easier to use now. You can just select from the Excel macro, tell it which reports you're loading, and pick a file, so you don't have to do the deleting of tabs and things, but that it's still there for consumption. We should update our slide deck, I think. Anyway, so counter release 5, there's been a lot of, hopefully a lot of discussions about this in the community. We've got a lot of feedback on it. It's in draft mode now. And so one of the things that's affected in release 5 of the counter code of practice, and we could do a whole session on that at some point, so we may want to schedule that for the future, Adele. But for now, we'll talk about the implications to sushi. And just to highlight the main points. So where sushi today is an XML-based protocol based on SOAP, Simple Object Access Protocol. In release 5, we're moving to what's more, they call it more of a RESTful interface, where JSON, which is JavaScript online notation, I believe, is exchanged. So if you're doing current day development of web applications, you're probably very familiar with RESTful interfaces. Basically, it's a URL, like you would put in a browser. And most of these languages have built-in support for JSON, so you can get a report and start using it much, much, much easier. So that release 5 is going to allow retrieval of full reports, but it'll also, we're introducing the notion of filters. So you could go and ask for usage from a content provider for just one journal. And so you can imagine some of the opportunities that brings in. Have an acquisitions module or a subscription management module where you're looking at doing a renewal and actually able to get the usage directly for a single journal and display it right then and there. So it really changes the whole workflow. Instead of the very batch-oriented approach that we have today with you download counter reports, you put them in somewhere, you process them, you get ready to do your reports, you run your reports, and then you do your next step and you refer back to those reports. This sets up the foundation for a lot better sort of interactive workflows where you're grabbing the decision data from multiple places. So this is an example of the request, and it's a little bit cryptic on the right, but you'll see it's a HTTPS. We're pointing to a server. We've got our requester ID. We've got the customer ID, platform we want, begin dates, end dates. Very, very simple. And this is what comes back, and we will zoom in because I don't expect you to read this. But so report header, report items. So if you remember back to what Ann was showing you on the XML, still not terribly human readable, a little bit more understandable than the XML. But the information there is there, same information, slightly different format, but formatted in a way that's much easier to be consumed by web applications. Also, there will be interactive online documentation. And if you've ever done anything with APIs online, these kinds of things are now the norm. So you'll be able to dig in, actually test things out, and it'll just be a whole lot easier to use. Okay, so that's coming in Release 5, but we'll leave us on this screen, which is the key points. Again, SUSHI is a protocol that allows a computer application to retrieve a counter report. And today it's an XML format. It needs a client. Configuring that client will require interaction with the content provider or their website. So understand that. They expect you to call if you can't get the answers. They don't expect you to just know. SUSHI returns XML. Counter 5 will return JSON. And if you don't have a system that consumes the counter XML, Excel can be used to produce analysis reports. Anne was showing you the fairly simple way to get the basic information, and then there's some other tricks that you can pull to, let's say, preserve the ISSNs and so forth within Excel as well, but there's tricks there. And then, again, I'll repeat this from earlier. If you're setting up for SUSHI and you're filling out the form and you don't know what to put in for requester ID or customer ID or even the URL, don't guess. Find a source with that information, whether it's the customer service of the content provider, their website or whatever, but don't guess. Because if you guess, every time that client attempts to harvest, it's going to result in failure. So with that, I think we're probably open to questions. Did we get questions?
Yeah, I saw a question came up earlier during Anne's talk, another one from Kelly for Q&A. How do you handle data analysis when importing SUSHI data into Excel, when SUSHI retrieves usage by individual month at a time and not for date ranges of 6 months to a year? In our ERM, all SUSHI reports appear in month segments. So this came through when Anne was talking. Anne, I think you were about on slide 120, if that helps. Do you want me to pass it back to you, or?
No, I think I can just talk about it. Yeah.
Okay.
So that example brought in 1 month at a time, but it can certainly do more. You get each of the months on different lines. So actually what we do in Viva is we would pull multiple months. Each journal for each platform has its own line for how many full text uses it has in that month. And then what we do is combine all of the data that we want into a very long Excel file, and then use pivot tables, which can help summarize that. So you can use the different powers of Excel to help you do some more analysis. If they're all just lines of data, it's hard to see what's going on. But when you start using pivot tables that can help summarize, and you can manipulate the different variables in different ways, that goes a long way. Does that answer the question, Kelly?
So yeah, there's another option too. You can do subtotals too, I believe, right? So with Excel, you could select the title and then introduce the ability to do subtotals, and then it would add them up, and then I think you can hide the detail. So there's a few options.
Okay. All right, thank you. I see another question. What is the availability date of counter R5? I'm not sure if you had mentioned that already.
I did not. So release 5 is, we're in just release draft 2. We hope to have the final text published in July. Content providers will have 18 months to comply. So that would mean that if you were a content provider and you were wanting to be SUSHI compliant with release 5, it would be January of 2019 would be your date. Now, if you are an ERM or attempting to provide usage consolidation services, we're thinking that you're probably going to want to comply by, let's say, the summer of 2018, because you'll want to be able to start accepting data when those publishers that release Counter 5 early start delivering it. Because it's a whole 1 hour talk on Counter Release 5, but there's a lot of advantages to Release 5. It addresses some of the shortcomings of Release 4. So publication in July this year, compliance date January 2019.
Okay. And also, will there be a period of time when the contents providers, support both Counter Release 4 and 5? I guess you would, I don't know if you would know that.
Yeah, we do. So the goal is, and there's actually several options. Now, it turns out that if you've read Release 5 information, it sounds vastly different from Release 4. But if you get down to the inner workings, the data in Counter 4 reports, you could actually derive from the Counter 5. So the expectation is there will be a period of time through which a librarian would be able to get either Release 4 data or Release 5 data. It may turn out that that's with separate tools that are provided to do a conversion. So one of the things from a practicality standpoint is we don't want to get into a situation where we delay everything because it's very expensive for a content provider to maintain 2 analytic systems, 2 logging systems, 2 reporting systems, and so forth. But on the other hand, we still need to address the need for the community to be able to get R4 data, R5 data, have comparative numbers, understand how to compare this year against last year, and that sort of thing. So there will be mechanisms by which both will be supported.
Okay, thank you. Another question came in: where is the best place to get documentation on the various fields in JR1, BR1 reports?
I think that's the friendly guides, right? Anne?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yes. So the Usus has access to those too, I believe.
Yeah, I was just looking.
So both the Counter site, projectcounter.org, and usus.org.uk have lots of valuable information, but Counter had commissioned a number of friendly guides, and there's friendly guides for librarians and friendly guides for publishers. So recommended reading, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and I wanted to mention that the Continuing Ed Committee has been talking about having a Counter 5 webinar also. So it's just a matter of trying to schedule it.
Yeah, well, we're here for you if you would like us to assist.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And, if you have any questions, go ahead and enter them into the Q&A or the chat. I'm seeing both. I thought that the screenshots that you did were very helpful. You know, as you with the examples, especially the third-party providers. I thought that was very helpful, Oliver, I'm sorry.
I get Oscar a lot too.
Do you?
Yeah. I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but yeah. So that's we attempted to do some walkthroughs from various sites and refresh them, because that is really key to. We've all done that. You have the demo and you go through it, and when person X showed it to you, it all makes perfect sense, and then you bring up the site, and it's like, what was that first click again? So I'm glad it was helpful.
It was. Thank you. Okay, and it looks like it's 2 o'clock. I don't see any more questions. So I guess we'll wrap this up. I want to thank Anne and Oliver for presenting today, and thank you to all the attendees. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you at a next continuing education event, and keep your eyes open for a Counter 5 coming soon, okay? All right, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
And a recording will be sent sometime tomorrow. Okay, have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.